God promised us an abundant life. And I frequently take God back over here to John 10:10 and say, you promised. John 10:10, you promised an abundant life. This, by no stretch of anybody's imagination, looks remotely like the abundant life. And I've had different theories on what the abundant life was. For a while I thought it was a tall, beautiful blonde. And I realized that wasn't the case. And then I thought the abundant life was probably the absence of pain, particularly in doctoral work. And that wasn't the case either. And so we've had this discussion and running dialogue for a long time now about the abundant life. And we have these two differing opinions as to what it ought to look like. Well, I was having this discussion back in 1980. You may have noticed I've been limping a little bit the last couple of days. I have a bad knee. In fact, I go in periodically for surgery, and then I go back for an oil and lube and an alignment every 2 or 3 years. And I'm slowly becoming a bionic knee as I invest my savings in that. But what happened was that a number of years ago, during IBS, I was playing softball with on the 4th of July with my church. And I was pitching a large Nerf ball to the batter, who was probably all of 3 feet tall and probably all of about 4 or 5 years old. And she took a mighty swing and hit the Nerf ball, and it dribbled out toward me. Now, this was a perfectly safe thing to be doing, except that there was a giant Neanderthal troglodyte on third base. He was 6'8", 285 pounds. He was drafted by the Rams. He didn't play with them. He's a pastor in Southern California. I'll tell you who it is. Some of you probably know him. And he plays football, doesn't play baseball. He doesn't know anything about sliding. He's never heard of sliding. He throws cross body blocks. So I pick up the Nerf ball, toothpick man, and I look over, and I didn't have to look. I could feel the earth move. I knew he was coming. So I thought, this is a stupid game. We're playing with we're not even keeping score. So I'm going to reach over and tag him out. It's hard to miss anything this big. And he gets up a full head of steam and realizes that he's going to get tagged out about, 10 feet before he gets to the plate. So instinct takes over, and he throws a cross-body block into my knee. And that ends a rather mediocre athletic career. Now, they took out the broken pieces, and said, you're on your own. And for the next several years, things kind of deteriorated gradually until finally the doctors just said, we're sorry. Well, by the time you're 30, we'll just have to fuse your knee, or you won't be able to walk at all. And I thought, God, I want you to look at John 10:10 with me one more time. This doesn't look like John 10:10. And then in 1980, I met an incredible man named Dr. Murayama. He's incredible because he is entrusted with $1 million knees. He does the Broncos. And I thought, I'll go talk with him. And we had a long talk, and he decided that there were some new techniques that had come along. Perhaps he could do something for my knee. And so I went into surgery, woke up a day or so later, and he said, I like good news and bad news. He said, the bad news is your knee was a lot worse than we thought. I mean, it is just gone. But the good news is there are new techniques, and we've been able to just reconstruct your knee. So I think you're going to be able to do a lot of things. Then he left. He left off one itty-bitty little thing. He didn't bother to tell me. He didn't tell me that there are 3 major nerves that run through your knee, and they don't appreciate it at all when you reconstruct the knee around them. And they scream and they holler an awful lot about it. And so for the next 2 weeks, God and I had this running discussion about John 10:10 because I wasn't getting any sleep. 1 hour in 4, the Percodan, a wonderful miracle drug, of which they kept well out of my reach. I was willing to talk to people, but it was got funny. My roommates would come down from Fort Collins to see how I was doing it, and they would. So I went home to my mother, of course, to have this done, and they would call, and 15 minutes later, I would get to the phone. Now the phone was only 1 room away, but it took a major amount of effort on everyone's part to get me in there because I kept passing out. Well, I thought, don't waste all this pain. I mean, how often do you get a chance like this? And so I thought, so I read the book of Job. Boy, I could identify with Job. And then I thought, finished Job off, still wasn't sleeping, had lots of time, trying to hide my left earlobe, kind of thinking about it. But anyway, I started reading The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis. Tremendous book. totally worthless if you're in pain, because it deals with the theological reasons for pain. I knew about pain. I wanted to know what to do with it. I didn't want to know why it existed. I had no trouble with it existing. But after I'd been reading through this book and getting a little more bummed, I noticed in the foreword an interesting little quote from George MacDonald. It said this: "The Son of God suffered unto death, not that men might not suffer, but that their suffering might be like his." Now, I didn't catch that the first 2 or 3 times around. But finally, I liked C.S. Lewis, and I wondered why he put that at the very front of his book. And I read it again carefully. "The Son of God suffered unto death, not that men might not suffer, but that their suffering might be like his." And I thought, well, what does that mean, the suffering be like his? Then it finally hit me. Jesus' suffering was redemptive. It wasn't pointless. Jesus wasn't simply beaten up, nailed on a cross like a bug, and died. He took the sin of the world on himself. It was redemptive for me and for you. It had a purpose. And I thought, God, Christ didn't come to end our suffering, but to make our suffering like his. And I thought, well, all this pain shooting through my knee, how could that be like his? And then I thought, well, your prayer, dearie, really isn't that God would stop the pain in your knee, but that you could walk. You're praying you can walk after you're 30. And the pain is just the bone knitting back together, and the joints and the sinew and the nerves. And probably the greatest physical evidence that God's answering your prayer is the pain in your knee. Then I had a cold chill run up and down my spine. I remembered something Dennis Rainey said one time. He said, sometimes the absence of pain is called leprosy. You're just numb. You never feel anything. It didn't hurt any less. But you know, I was able to appreciate the pain a lot more because I felt that God was probably answering a much deeper prayer in my life. And my guess is that there are going to be times in your life, maybe even right now, when you think, oh, God, give me a break. God, 10:10, don't you remember? And he says, I remember. But you know, I remember another prayer that you made. You asked me to make you like my son. And this is part of the process. And so I'm going to take the deepest level of your prayer, and that's the one I'm going to answer. And you're not going to understand why all the things on the surface levels don't turn out the way you want. You're just going to have to trust me. C.S. Lewis wrote in Mere Christianity a quote I have for you. It says, "Make no mistake," Christ says, "if you let me, I will make you perfect. The moment you put yourself in my hands, that's what you're in for. Nothing less or other than that. You have free will, but if you choose, you can push me away. But if you do not push me away, understand that I'm going to see this job through. Whatever suffering it may cost you in your earthly life, whatever it costs me, I will never rest, nor let you rest until you are literally perfect, until my Father can say without reservation that he is well pleased with you, as he said he was well pleased with me. This I can do and will do, but I will not do anything less." It's got to be the toughest thing about the Christian life. It's so hard for me, and I suspect it's true for a lot of us. You kind of like Christ to make you a little better than you are, clean you up, make you respectable, but not to keep meddling. I mean, after all, it becomes painful after a while. But it's interesting, of course, God didn't save us to be a sensation, but to be a servant. And the roles aren't always easy. Kind of reminds me of a field with a treasure in it and some of the prices that you pay. Well, there are a lot of things that we can learn from Acts, and we will be going back to Acts. Let me point out one more thing for you. I've gone through and pulled out the tradition of what happens to the apostles. See, this very